Uh, all right. Thanks for getting on the call. I think we're going to have a couple others join on. They indicated they'd be on, they're just not on yet. How was last week? I would love to just get a quick bead on what your feeling is on going on in the market, because I get that question a lot, and I wonder what everybody else is seeing, feeling, thinking. How's the market? Anyone?
Yeah,
Seriously?
you know what's interesting is we talked in our sales meeting is before a stat becomes a stat, it's an anecdote or a narrative, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And there was a couple of national articles that were kind of doom and gloomy for real estate market.
Uh-huh.
And I don't think our narrative or anecdotes match those articles.
Okay.
So those articles, when you think about it, like the stats that they're polling, it's January and February, and yeah, those were pretty crappy months. And I feel like the market's better, but like, you know, there's always that hesitation, and you get some of that pushback from buyers. So
Okay. Josh, what's your take on the market?
I think the market's great. I think if you're putting the effort in that's required as an individual, as a sole proprietor, if you're running your business as a business, the market is awesome right now. I actually have a deal I'm going under contract with on a property out in Duchesne that, you know, it's been on the market 30 days, but that's normal.
I think you mean Duchesne, don't you?
Yeah, Duchesne, whatever you want to call it. Going under contract with that, got a buyer that is, I called around, I did some circle prospecting. One of the neighbors wanted the property more than someone else. They had extra cash, and so they're going to be purchasing it. I've got a buyer that I'm going under contract with this morning. Their mother passed away, unfortunately, but they were able to sell her home and sell her cars and other assets, and they're going to be purchasing this home almost, 80% of the cash that they have, they're going to be using to purchase this home. So, I mean, there's buyers, there's sellers out there. Just on Friday, if this gives you any confidence, just on Friday, there were 93 homes that were sold, meaning hypothetically, there were 93 buyers agents and 93 sellers agents just on Friday that closed homes on the MLS. So were you one of those? Were you not one of those? That's what you have to ask. And why were you not one of those people? Because there's technically 200 transactions that happened, if you include both sides, and obviously there's some room for error. But if you weren't one of those, why were you not one of those? So I think it's a great time to help educate clients. And obviously, if clients are not wanting to make a move right now, then just stay in touch with them. Not everyone is going to want to move or sell or buy, but they will eventually when the time is right.
Yeah, all great points. I hope, I don't want to spend our whole meeting on this point, but I think it is so important, so salient right now. The market correction is, some would argue, not, meaning this month and last month, is not statistically significant. I mean, you're within one standard deviation of normal. And so, we all hear it, right? And if you participate in the Facebook groups that are out there, which are just the bane of my existence, to be perfectly honest, a lot of them, because half the people don't know what the hell they're talking about. They just want a pulpit to speak from so they can be heard. They really don't have a lot of facts to back up what they're saying. And a lot of that messaging is negative. And so I have to chastise myself. I'm like, oh, thank goodness they're out there, because they're talking a lot of other people into this is a crappy market. And we're the intelligent, educated ones. And hopefully we understand that, yeah. I did a review on the UAR's last month's data for March. And one of the things I did is I drew a box around, when you're looking at the 10 years, I drew a box around 2020 and 2021. And I labeled that, those are statistical anomaly years. So if you're basing your assessment on those years, you're a fool. Sorry. They're just not indicative of what our market can bear. And when you kind of weight average it over the past 3 to 5 years, you start to get a better sense of where we are. And we're pretty dang close to normal. but everybody, a good portion of who's talking is negative. So you're spot on, Josh, Dan. You know, it's a good market. Yes, it's going to take a little more work, but man, if you invest the time, it will pay dividends. So get out there and hustle after it. Very good. Hey, Robert, question for you. In the commercial space, what's it feeling like? I mean, I know that's not all of our forte, but I'm just kind of round out the conversation.
Yeah, it's really active. There's still a lot what I call stupid money out there. So they're more money than brains. I think it'll dry up probably by the end of the year. The biggest problem I've got is financing, because our world's different.
Yeah.
And they're really trying to slow down commercial lending even more than residential. So even though I've read reports that 2022 was up about 15% in commercial lending, I've seen now that March was half of February and February was half of January. So that's probably the biggest challenge we have right now is in the underwriting, and because of what cap rates have got to do to adjust to your borrowing rate. We're seeing your debt coverage ratio's got to be, if you know what that is, 1.25. It shouldn't exceed 1.25. And in order to get there now, you have to put down 35%. I ran numbers on one yesterday that was 40% down. Because if you're trying to buy at 5.5 cap with a 7% loan, you're hosed. You've got negative leverage and you're losing all that money on your loan, that spread. And so that's really killing our numbers. I've got a 24 unit building I just ran numbers on to list it with Laura Bangeter, and it's going to be tough. It's going to be tough getting the loan. Somebody might have to get 45% down just to get a loan.
So what I'm hearing from all of this, I hope you guys are picking up on this, and this is part of why I wanted to do this, is we should all, take Robert to lunch. It's a rough time for Robert, and be thankful you're more squarely in residential and you don't have to deal with all the ratios and numbers that aren't so good. All joking aside, in the residential space, and we'll finish this little portion up, especially when you're talking about buyers, and I'm not saying sellers aren't important, but I think the buyer mentality dovetails with what the sellers feel. What are your top 2 or 3 items? Each one of you take one. What are the top 2 or 3 things that you're telling buyers of why they should be buying now? Houston, unmute yourself.
Yeah. The biggest thing I talk about is honestly, it's those are statistical anomaly years. Yes. And so the only thing that's like people have to make themselves aware of or come to terms with is the fact that this is actually normal, and that was not normal in any way. And so, and the statistics to back that would be population projections. And so I'm just like, look at there, we've got 60% population growth in Utah in the next 7 years. And the number 2 state behind us is 10% population growth.
Yeah.
And so Utah is off the charts and the demand isn't going anywhere.
Oh, you just hit my favorite word. Everybody talks about the market and Utah is capped out. It's like not even close. Demand gets stalled. That's the only thing that happens. We have done nothing nationally, but even more so statewide, to address ridiculous demand. Right.
Yeah.
And so if we're gonna be like intellectually honest with our clients, and we have to be careful how we say this, right? Because you could also spook them, but be like, hey, listen, you hired me to represent you, right? To give you a clear shot of what's going on in the market. And I know what I'm about to tell you isn't exactly, rose-colored glasses, but again, that's why you hired me. This little blip that we had, this stall in the market, is just that from a buyer's perspective. Money's getting cheaper, and it will continue to over the next 3 to 6 months. The inventory, good news is we're 3 times what we were 2 years ago on inventory, right? We're still a little below what the normal market would bear. But if you're holding on, and I think this is the message, if you're holding on for better times, these are the better times. I
Yep.
know that's fine. I know that's hard to believe, but these are the better times,
Yep.
right? What I don't want to do is have a conversation with you 6 months from now and say, Matt, Houston, how come you weren't honest with me? How come you didn't tell me what was going on, right? And I think when you approach it in that context, people wake up. They're like, huh. And if you can back it up with some data like you just did, and I think that's kind of the stark end of the spectrum of the message. The good news is there's still a lot of incentives on traditional sellers and even some builders. Some builders are starting to raise prices again already, right? But there's still some that are offering a lot of incentives. There's always, learn this term where some
They were on that right when the market was transitioning. That's the reason they're still trying to sell low, because the values are going nowhere.
Yeah. I think learn the term laggard effect. Sellers always operate under a laggard effect. They're late to the game, right? And the good news for a buyer right now is that laggard effect. The sellers still think, oh, it's kind of tough, right? Get it while you can, because once it's obvious that the market has turned, they're going to be right back to kind of where they were a year ago, right? So, okay, very good. Well, thank you for your contribution on that. In fact, I wanted to show you one quick thing, if I can pull it up here. Yeah, I'm just going to show this. Let me share my screen. Share. If you're not leveraging the UAR data, let's see if I can pull this over here. I have way too many windows open. So UAR comes out with monthly data. If you look down at the bottom, this is current as of April 10th. In the world of stats, that's pretty fresh data, right? And one of the things I did, not to go through all of these, but just simply this graph at the bottom, right? If you go back 10 years, our median sales price was 190. Even including the downturn of the last 9 months, we're at 520. 190 to 520 over the past 10 years. And here's some talking points. If you want a copy of this, just shoot me an email. I'll be happy to send it to you. I also have it statewide. But these are the talking points, I think, right? You're fixing your rent. If you're talking first-time home buyers, right? Rents are going up. They continue to go up. You're fixing your rent for 30 years. Second point, your 190 became 520. That's an increase of 330,000 over the past 10 years. And Robert, these are spitball numbers, so don't pick them apart. But that's roughly 17.4% per year. And oh, by the way, this is point number 3, you only had to actually invest 5% of the initial investment of 190,000. So really your return is 347%. Again, these are spitball numbers and you can pick a couple things apart, but roughly speaking, that's the message, right? And oh, by the way, the last thing, we haven't even started to talk about the mortgage interest rate deduction and how that impacts your finances as well. So good market, bad market. If you look at this curve, right, and you look over the past 10 years, we should be able to say real estate is still a phenomenal investment. Good market, bad market, slight downturns. The overall trend over the past 100 years is this graph, even including the Great Recession. So make sure you've got some good dialogue there. All right, let's go to, let's see. I wanted to pull up, let's see, stop share for a sec. One of the things I wanted to talk about, because I get this from time to time. Oh, before we go any further, administrative rule. That's what I was supposed to do. We finished all of these are the things that you should do. We're now into the section of things that you should not do. We covered item A last week, and we're going to quickly cover B, C, and D. So let me just read them real quick. You shall not A licensee may not require parties to acknowledge receipt of a final copy of any document prepared before each party has signed. I know that sounds crazy. That still happens from time to time. Are you guys seeing this on screen?
No, we're not.
Oh, that's because I'm not sharing. Now you're seeing it. I'll take that as a yes. All right, fantastic. So yeah, I mean, that seems obvious, right? This item B, you shouldn't require somebody to acknowledge a executed copy delivered when it's not executed. The second one, item C, is make a representation to the division upon your renewal that's not true, or in an investigation. The third one, item D, prepare. This is the important one. Prepare, or cause to be prepared a document, agreement, settlement statement, or other device that the licensee knows or should know does not reflect the true terms. What is my favorite word for that one? It's a double contract. Here's what we're presenting to the underwriters as an example, and here's what the real deal is. And notice the division does not make a distinction of how significant the difference is between the two agreements. If there is daylight between the two agreements, you are in the realm of a double contract. And just to let you know, I dealt with this 3 times last week, 3 times in our company, right? And a lot of times it's just in the neighbor, certain repair items were to be done, right? And one of them, there's a lot of detail, and I'm just using this as an example. I'm not going to say who the agents were, but pretty experienced agent. And this is what I tell people is, you know what, it all seems well and good when everybody's head is nodding in the right direction. Yeah, we agreed to do that. Yes, we agreed to do that. And that my second favorite line is, it's never a problem until it's a problem. And then that's when I typically get involved. And the first thing I go to in most of these cases is, show me the documentation. Right? Now, notice it didn't say that this just has to be in writing. You can have an agreement that is verbal as well. And so if you find yourself in a situation, and I need to make the distinction here, we can talk, for instance, prior to a due diligence and say to the other side, we can say, hey, X, Y, or Z needs to be done before our due diligence, or my buyer potentially is going to walk because those issues aren't resolved. We all know that there's no obligation for the seller to do that, but if they want to keep the deal on track, then that needs to be done, right? That is legit. I've checked with the DRE that you can talk about those things and try and handle them prior to your due diligence. But let's say, for instance, you go past the due diligence and it's kind of like, well, you know what, we're gonna pay the buyers $5,000 because we weren't able to get the roof done, the leaks in the roof repaired. That's a double contract. Why is that an issue? Why, from an underwriter standpoint, why is that an issue? Anybody? If you don't volunteer, I'm going to just pick on you. Don, you want to give it a swing?
Repeat the question.
So in the world of double contracts, right? Why, if you and I were doing a deal and we went past our due diligence and it's like, well, gosh, you know what? We're so close to closing. Don't really want to put something in an addendum in regards to a roof repair. Hey, my buyers will, write a check, held at title for $5,000, and your buyers can take care of it after we close. Why is that a problem to an underwriter? This is an important point.
Well, I don't really know why it's a problem for the underwriter, but I know it's a problem for the underwriter. The underwriter gives us problems because they may want that to be done prior to closing, and then there's no money in the deal to do it prior to closing because the money's coming from the sale. And so it screws everybody up. So that's why sometimes you don't submit those addendums, even though it's in writing to the lender.
Okay, well, we do have an obligation to submit those. Just let's start there.
I
Second,
understand that.
I know you do. I just want to make sure recorded on this call, I actually stated it. So the real reason here, right, is lenders. I mean, those of us that have been in the industry long enough, we can remember when you had a carpet allowance and you had a, this allowance and that allowance. And after 08, 09, those vaporized. They largely went away. And if I were to boil it down to a simple concept, it's because lenders want to lend on what is, not what can be. So is it possible? So I'm the underwriter now on this deal. And I think, hey, I'm lending on a house that has no problems. In reality, in the secondary contract that I'm not aware of, there's been an issue raised that we've got a leak on the property that I'm about ready to lend $700,000 on that I'm now not aware of. The seller has agreed to give $5,000 to the buyer. And I know I'm doing the theoretical maximum here, but let's make it $15,000. And they closed the deal, and the buyer really wasn't qualified. And within a few months, they're into a foreclosure scenario. I know that never happens. I used to deal with foreclosures for 3 years. It happens. And that $15,000 that was supposed to be applied to the asset that I, the underwriter, lent on, never actually got repaired. And so when I get the property back through foreclosure, I get a property back that is something less than I actually originally lent on, right? Right? It has a roof issue that I was never aware of, or I would not have lent the $700,000 on. And in that case, now we have a double contract. If we as agents were aware of that, we're now potentially in the crosshairs of loan fraud and other things that could just wipe out your licensure, right? So again, this is the extreme. This is the theoretical to demonstrate the point, whether it's large or small. The division, that's just the administrative arm, not the civil portion. The administrative arm says, yeah, we've dealt with this more times than we would care. You just shall not do that. Do not create an alternate contract that everybody's not aware of. So, all right, that is our DRE rule for this week. Any questions on that? All right, good. You're all recorded, nodding your head. Fantastic. Thank you. All right. I wanted to jump into something that I get a lot of questions on, and hopefully this makes some sense for you guys and will be helpful. So, property management. How many of you have investment properties? Come on, raise your hands. All right. Is there any problem with managing your own properties? Sorry, let me phrase that differently. Does the division of real estate have any problem with you managing your own investment properties? Thank you, Brandon. Well, I have Houston saying yes, and I have Brandon saying no. So Brandon, you said no. Houston, I'm going to give you an opportunity to tell us why it's a problem.
Well, I mean, if I remember correctly, and I may not.
That's okay. We're all friends here.
There's some kind of limit, like 6 properties that you can manage yourself as your own investment properties before you have to open a property management billing account, just to help uncommingle accounting.
Correct. So you're right. You cannot exceed 6 that you property manage, but if they are your own properties, I can manage as many properties as I own. Right. So it's if you're managing for your dad who has some properties,
Right.
Things that are not directly owned by you. Yep, there is a maximum hit on that. And I wanted to touch on some of the points, and I want to start off just with the quarterly newsletter. So I'm going to pull that up over here.
So Matt, let me just clarify what you just said. If I'm repeating this back to you,
Please
correct?
don't clarify me.
Let me know. So I can manage anyone else's properties as a licensed real estate agent up to the amount of 6 properties without having
Family.
only family. Okay.
Yeah, if you're into essentially the commercial space, right? You have a requirement to be with a brokerage that does property management. Okay. If you're being paid to manage by, for instance, I'm going to stick with that example, your dad, can you do that and manage those properties? Yes, but it cannot exceed 6 properties.
And that's
Does our
yours, that's
brokerage have a
6
property
properties.
management?
Oh, I knew that one was coming, Houston. We actually do have a property management, but we do not really, it's really more for the company itself, right? Meaning if we had an asset that we wanted to rent out or lease, but we don't have an active program for property management within the company, if that makes sense. It's not a focus of our residential and commercial brokerage. Okay. I need to drag this over here just a minute.
Was that a company that we own, the property management company?
Yeah, it is part of our brokerage, yes. Okay, so I want to proceed through this, and I think this will flesh out a lot of these issues, but the first note I had on this, right? Oh, before I jump into that, I wish Parker Smith would have been, well, I'll come back to this and see if he's on by then. What can an agent do? What can't an agent do in property management? So if we go to the DRE quarterly newsletters, these are a pretty good indication of what is going on in the world of property management. So I'm going to quickly rattle through a couple of these. If you go to Q4 of 2022, Control F, property management. I just wanted to highlight a couple of these because I think they're worth, there's a little entertainment value, but it's also instructive to us, right? All right. Pamela Sloan, I'm going to quickly read through this. The violations include, I'm going to reduce the formalities. 1, being incompetent to act as a sales agent in such a manner as to safeguard the interests of the public. So I'm going to go back to that. A lot of us go and say, well, yeah, I'm licensed, I can do property management. Has anybody actually ever really done property management outside of your own properties? Robert, yeah, there's way more to it than you would ever consider. And I'm going to finish with a doozy when we're done with this. Okay, item number 2, failing to respond to a request within the division within 10 days. Yeah, that's just a bonehead move. Our policy within the company is to try and get them an answer back to any inquiry they have within 24 to 48 hours to show them we're on top of our game. Number 3, failing to uphold fiduciaries owed to a principal. Number 4, failing to hold safe and account for money entrusted to her. 5, failing to execute a written agency agreement with her principal. 6, failing to conform to the accepted standards of real estate property management industry. So if you've never done property management, how do you know what the industry standards are? That's just an interesting question. And I would turn around and kind of say the same thing about commercial, right? We are licensed to sell real estate, but we are also required to operate in the realm of our expertise. And so Robert will appreciate this. Robert, would you work with me, who's never really done a lot of commercial? Would you allow me to be on a contract with you and pay me a referral fee?
Yes.
Yes. But you would probably not be okay with me going out and touting myself as a commercial agent, because I would not know all those ratios you just talked about, and that's just the tip of the iceberg. So much like that in the commercial space, it's true in the property management space. I'm gonna season this discussion with one quick little anecdote. Everybody knows in the residential space about lead-based paint disclosure, right? And we're required on a pre-1978 home to do a disclosure first, and then if needed, an addendum. I love it when I see the addendum and there's no disclosure. You realize this also applies to rental properties? Yeah, and the fines from the federal government are in the neighborhood of $15,000 per violation. I remember reading a case a year or so ago about a property manager who had not properly disclosed the existence of lead-based paint in a multi-unit property. And if I remember, it was like 10 units. at $15,000 per violation, $150,000 violation, and good luck fighting the federal government. Okay, so these are not small potatoes things. They're not insignificant. They're things we really should pay attention to. Go ahead, Robert.
In Salt Lake City, you're required to provide tenants a copy of, I can't remember the ordinance. I think it's ordinance 82. It's called the Fit Premises Act. And so even in some cities, you're required to give tenants a disclosure.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, there are so many things that you could run afoul with. Okay, so this next one, Barry Daniel, dual broker, meaning doing residential and property management in a stipulated order, blah, 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 failed to conduct property inspections and assessments required by property management agreements, failed to enforce terms of the tenant leases, failed to attempt to collect charges owed by the tenants, failed to verify authenticity of tenant documents. He admits he did not comply with property owners' conditions for trust funds or for repairs and improvements. Are you already getting a headache? To owners' properties, he did not reasonably care, did not use reasonable care and diligence in providing management services to property owners, blah, 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 $7,000 fine. The first one was $3,500. And yes, I'm building to a crescendo. Let's go to the last one I have here. Let's see. Q3. Oh yeah, this is at the tail end of this Q3 newsletter. You'll love this one. Equity Real Estate Property Management. Eric Lee, Kristen Matalonis, conducted business of property management over an extended period of time without first registering with the division, going back to our threshold of 6. And if it's for commercial purposes, you still need to be a property manager. Over a period of time without registering with the division, without Mr. Lee, the principal broker, filing a separate registration for property management or being licensed as a dual broker, blah, 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 blah. You can read this at your own leisure. Fine, $23,500. Yeah, so there are a lot of significant things in regards to property management. For those of you that own investment properties, what are some of the things that you deal with as a property manager? And Robert, I want you to be queued up on some things that are beyond that in the commercial space. Dan, what have you experienced with your rentals? Any bad episodes?
None yet, to be honest with you.
Find some wood and knock on it.
I know my cousin is an attorney and has a couple properties, and we have a good contract and we follow procedures and we have a checkout list. And
wait, say that first one. What was the first thing you had?
A good contract.
That is 85-90% of the battle. Have a good contract with specific terms with strong repercussions. Okay.
Yeah.
What about somebody who says, I have a support animal?
Have a what?
I have a support animal.
Oh, dude. So, I mean, we've been fortunate to have more than one applicant to choose from. And we do due diligence, and if they have dogs in their photos on Facebook or Instagram or whatever, then we just do not communicate with them.
So you discriminate.
I don't know if that's the word that we would use, but you're gosh dang right we do.
Dan, this is being recorded.
I know, right? So like, we like it's tough if you get somebody in there and they have a support animal. I don't know if there's a way to not rent to them.
Well, let's do the two classifications.
We've done our due diligence on our tenants.
There's a service animal and there's a support animal. Are they different?
Yeah, they are.
What's the difference, Josh?
I just know they're different. The support animal, you have to
reverse that.
Yeah,
the service animal, sorry.
The service animal is like an ADA animal, right? Deaf, blind,
they're trained for a specific purpose and role to help the
individual.
Individual.
Yeah. And those are a hard, fast, don't mess with them, right? Now, in my rental agreement, I say no pets allowed. Okay. So in the world of fair housing, you realize that up until you have your fourth investment property, the fair housing rules don't apply to you. With one big caveat, and you're gonna hate this one, as long as you're not a licensed real estate agent.
Yeah.
So if
That's
you're
where they
going
get
to do, if you're going to do this and want that protection, make sure you put the properties in the name of your wife who's not licensed, or your kids, or an LLC. Even an LLC is not going to give you a lot of coverage, because if you're one of the principals of the LLC, it still applies. Okay. But Dan, to your point, and this is really just kind of a recommendation for anybody who has their own properties to manage. It's pretty hard for anybody to make a case. I mean, the burden of proof on them, and it's beyond the preponderance, which means beyond 51%. That's the lowest legal threshold to show that you're actually discriminating, right? I can sit there and say, well, we review a whole host of things: their credit scores, their how long they've been at a job, what, any number of things I can put together. And as long as I can correctly attribute to any one of those, it's really hard for them to say I was discriminating because they had a support animal, which, by the way, just a personal gripe of mine. I think most of the support animals are out there just because people can't be outside without having their little pup with them. And I have a dog, so I'm not in my ivory tower. Okay, so there are things to be concerned about. Go ahead, Robert.
Dan, you're supposed to take the first qualified applicant.
Yeah, right.
Unless you have stipulated that you will be taking applicants for a period of time and reviewing all applicants against each other. As long as you have a documented plan to show that you're not discriminating, then you can forego that first qualified applicant.
Maybe do that on a small level, but if you're running a management company, never do that.
For sure. I was sorry, this was all phrased within those of us that own investment properties. So
I didn't know that was a rule, that you're supposed to take the first qualified person. And then also, Matt, I'm glad that you pointed out that there's a way to have a review period.
Yeah.
And then go from there.
Yeah, run that up with your attorney and get a decent section written out for you that you can forward to the rest of us.
oh man,
Yeah, there you go.
you leapfrog Houston. That was going to be my final thing. Work with an attorney. It's worth the money in this situation. Okay.
Hey, Matt, I've got a question real quick while we're on this subject.
By the way, before you ask your question, did you get your arm operated on yet?
Yeah, I'm still kind of on meds, so if I
Okay,
sound
good.
loopy, then I'm not. So in the past, I've actually had people ask me if I'm reporting their rental to boost their credit reports, like whether they pay on time or not. And I don't know if Robert knows the answer to this, or any of the other part of these people do in this group chat, but where do you go when you do property management to report whether they pay on time, or they've left early, or to give other property managers a track record of what they're doing? Do you have any information on that?
Great question.
There's services that provide that, so that you can actually help your tenants build their credit. I know they're out there. I don't know the vendor that does it. You can subscribe to directly if you wanted to with one of the reporting agencies, but that's more paperwork and stuff.
Sure.
I understand the way to go. There is vendors that provide that service.
You understand the way to go is what?
I'd find a vendor that provides that service. It's a little bit easier than going direct to the reporting agencies.
Gotcha. Okay. So you would just
They're out there.
Google vendors to report rental income. Is that what you type in?
Yeah, maybe check, I think it's Wasatch Reporting, see what they do here in Salt Lake.
Okay. All right. I appreciate that, Robert. Thanks.
It's a good question. And I think for those of us that have rental properties, one of the things that I've done, I'll just throw it out there. First of all, do you still need to disclose you're an agent? You damn well better. If you think it's just because it's your private property, because you're licensed, you still have that disclosure obligation. Even if it's not being run through a brokerage, you still have to disclose. Okay, but I have told my renters, and I put it in our lease, that if they pay on time, meaning by the first of the month, and there's no glitch in that for the time that they're a renter. If and when they decide to no longer be a renter and buy a property, if they use that, if they go and purchase a property and utilize me as their agent, I will credit them back a certain percentage of rents towards the purchase. So trust me, I don't want to cycle. It's not a huge incentive, but I had this happen one time already. And yeah, I got reached out to help purchase a property. So, you know, look for ways to make it work even better for you. All right, I've got 2 more things to hit on, and then
That was brilliant.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Right. And I think if you have a good relationship with your tenants, right? I mean, stupid things. Hey, listen, I'm going to come by every 6 months and give you an air filter, and I'll come in and replace it. And whatever it is, just to show that you're a better landlord than others. I've, to date, knock on wood, I've had phenomenal relationships with my tenants, and they even pay early, which is almost unheard of. Right. And I don't accept checks. You have to pay me via Venmo. Right. So I don't get the excuses of, oh, the check's in the mail, I sent it 2 days ago. You know, it's pretty slick. So 2 other things I wanted to touch on. If you want to write these down, you can look at these at your own leisure. These are the codes that deal with this: R162, 2F, 403A. Actually, I'm going to just pull this over to my screen so you can see my agenda here, right? So this particular code talks about your property management trust account, and this is one of the huge reasons. If you're doing this as a commercial venture, you've got to be running it through a brokerage.
What were those codes again? R162?
It's on my screen here if you can see it, right here. I've got it highlighted on screen.
Sweet. Thank you.
So different than a real estate company, I mean, we have to maintain a separate trust account. You cannot commingle property management trust funds with real estate transaction trust funds. There's a separate trust account. So if you're doing this in the commercial space, my first question is, do you have a trust account set up? Because, oh, by the way, where are you putting security deposits? Where are you getting rents and paying out? And what is your accounting system for doing that? And, you know, when I look at it, the amount of dollars you get per door, and this is why it just has never made sense to me, agents who want to dabble in quote unquote commercial property management, and you realize how few dollars you get per door. It only starts to make sense when you have huge economies of scales, right? 200, 300, 400 doors, right? If you're doing 5, 10 doors, I'm telling you, you're going backwards on the money you could make in your residential business by far. So that section, and 403B was the amended version of that talks about the trust account. If you want to look a little more in detail in the Q1 newsletter of 2021 for the DRE, they actually do an extensive article on property management and all the things that are required. And you'll read that and you'll just go away going, yep, I just need to find somebody I can refer my rentals to. So I wanted to share with you a story just to kind of, I guess this is in the category of being scared straight. So at the last company I was at, Everest, we actually did have a property management entity. And one deal in particular, we got notified that we were being sued. And that's never a pleasant thing, you know, but you think, oh, you do a preliminary look at all of your docs, and you're like, we're solid, this is stupid, plus we have to go to mediation first. Well, here was the situation: 2 doors. You know how much we're making per month on that? I think over slightly over a year that we had those properties, you're talking a couple grand. $2,000. Older couple, very educated, lived back in Pennsylvania. I mentioned older, kind of a protected class, sympathetic witnesses, right? Or plaintiffs, I should say. And they came and said, we want, I can't remember, I think it was somewhere in the neighborhood of $120,000. It's like, we made $2,000. What's your complaint? And I'm going to greatly modify this just for time's sake. they basically said, you guys did not live up to your fiduciaries. And so we sat down with our property manager, Phil. Phil's a very good dude, very thorough. He's like, what are they talking about? Well, fast forward, we get to formal mediation. And by the end of that day, including things leading up to that, we had spent $30,000 on attorneys, right? And we were convinced we were in the right, and we got talking about stuff. The mediator, his name's David Slaughter, perfect name, Slaughter. Actually a very intelligent guy, lots of legal experience. Halfway through the day, he came and said, listen, I'm just telling you in advance, these guys actually have a pretty good probability of winning out on this. And so we're looking at this going, all right, well, and I'm leaving out a lot of arguments and a lot of discussion that took place. By the way, we were there from 9 in the morning till 6:30 at night, no lunch, no dinner, nothing, just straight negotiations. Eventually David Slaughter said, listen, these guys are out of state. They're old, they're very educated, and they are going to be a very sympathetic plaintiff. And so the deck is stacked against you. And we're like, well, on what legal basis, right? Because here's the contract. It said that we can inspect the properties. It doesn't say we shall inspect the properties. There's this lovely legal doctrine called implied duties. Implied. The fact that they're old, out of state, their properties are here in the state of Utah, he says they will win when they say that was an implied duty for you to inspect. And Phil said, I set up they would come out annually and give them the opportunity to inspect the property. And he did. And guess what? They never inspected it. But they never told him that he didn't inspect it. And so the obligation is still back to the property management, right? Because they're getting dollars in their pockets, and there's certain things that were implied duties. And so we sat down after all that with our attorneys, our 2 attorneys, and said, what are our chances of winning? And they said, maybe 50-50, probably 40-60. And if we win, how much is it going to cost us? Remember, how much have we already spent by this point? $30,000. They said it's going to be a minimum of $120,000 to take this through court and win. And oh, by the way, you won't be able to recoup your attorney's fees. So it would have cost us $150,000 to win, right? These are the stories I love to tell agents when they get all cavalier, like, should take them to court. Any good attorney will tell you, any great attorney will tell you, there's always like a 20% probability that you have no control over. It could be the judge, it could be the jury, it could be the way that things unfold. Doesn't matter how solid you are, there's like a 20% chance you could still get screwed. you go in knowing that, right? So in this situation, we're looking at it going, all right, that's when we got to the negotiating. We ended up settling on $55,000 to pay them, to settle, to go away. We worked it out so it was on a payment plan, so time value of money was like $50,000, but still $50,000 plus $30,000, $80,000. And how much did we make on these guys? $2,000. Plus, if you just rack up the amount of time and our salaries to defend it, it was very instructive for me yet again that there are things to dabble in. There are things probably not worth your time and the risk that it entails. My personal opinion is property management is high risk, low yield. Your residential contracts are, high yield, relatively low risk. And so hopefully that means something to you as we talk about this. If you honestly, the best thing you can do if you're getting somebody asking you to, property manage 4, 5, 10 doors, find a good property manager to refer them to and take the referral fee and walk away. As an example, in Utah County, Vision Real Estate, I've used them a few times. They're fantastic. They will actually pay you your referral fee based on the lease that was signed, which is typically a minimum of a year. They will pay you your referral fee up front. And when the people go to sell, they refer them back to you for the sell. That sounds like a good equation for me. Find out who that is in your neck of the woods, foster that relationship, get the dollars you can get out of it, and avoid all of the risk. Okay. Any questions, concerns, anecdotes? Robert.
We are working on that vertical.
Good.
It-
Yeah, I knew those things were in the works. I just didn't want to open the floodgates before that actually materializes. So to
But
Rob,
we still
Yeah.
have an affiliate vendor.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, work with our affiliate vendor, PMI, Wasatch.
there you go. I didn't know that was our vendor, but thanks for sharing that. And yes, when the time comes and if it makes sense and we have enough doors and we want to open that vertical, that will happen. I'm just telling you the lay of the land today. Utilize PMI, Vision, whoever. Okay. Appreciate you guys being on this call. I really think the discussions we have, the things that we cover really do make us much better agents, and hopefully they round out your conversations you have with your clients. My experience has been when you can speak intelligently to the whole gamut of things, people have a lot more trust in you, and it's much easier to secure their business. And so thanks for being on the call, and hope it serves you well.
Thanks, Matt.
All right, guys, have a good Monday.